You guys know what Aragorn looks like from The Lord of the Rings. He looks like this. Unless, of course, you're Wizards of the Coast, because then he looks like this. That's right, Wizards of the Coast has, of course, race-swapped Aragorn, which we all knew, but what I want to talk about is this very interesting article from The Gamer. Magic the Gathering's Aragorn backlash is just another racist trap. So welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and we're going to talk about this absurd article and all that it has to offer, if we can truly call it an offering. So let's get to it. Magic the Gathering's Aragorn backlash is just another racist trap, and frankly, I do agree, but I guarantee you I don't agree in the way that the article is going to make us believe. So, the new Magic the Gathering art is stunning, but sadly, the backlash is not surprising. And frankly, I'll admit, it is very stunning art. It is a very well done piece of art. But it's not Aragorn, by the way, nor is that Aragorn's sword. That looks like something, to quote a buddy of mine, out of Final Fantasy X. This isn't Aragorn, this isn't anything Lord of the Rings. This would be a great Magic card art-wise if they weren't touting it as a Lord of the Rings card. Another year, another Lord of the Rings adaptation under fire. Yeah, because every single adaptation post the Peter Jackson films has been garbage. People weren't criticizing Rings of Power because they were all racist. I'm sorry, that's just mathematically and statistically impossible. People are going to criticize what is, without a doubt, the most famous fantasy IP in the world when it doesn't meet their expectations because it's got a lot of fans on account of it being the most famous fantasy IP in the world. The same week as Ismael Cruz Cordova revealed that Amazon hired an on-set therapist to help actors fight against racist backlash while filming the Rings of Power's second season, abuse which racists then denied and demanded receipts for. You mean people want receipts for accusations of one of the most heinous things you could be called? Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair ask. I mean, we have, in the court of law, innocent until proven guilty. That's a pretty big deal. So when someone's called racist, is it so wrong to say, yo, prove that we're racist, or maybe, just maybe, we love this IP and you guys are bastardizing it. People are angry that Magic the Gathering's Aragorn is black, and they should be. They absolutely should be. Not angry because he's black, but angry because he is not Aragorn. It doesn't matter what the IP is, Magic the Gathering, Dragon Ball Z, name any famous nerd love that has a lot of passion behind it. Changes are going to, rightfully so, make people a little uptight. Or is Dragon Ball Evolution, not worthy of any sort of criticism because there's some changes to it? Oh, but, we can interpret characters and stories whatever way we want when adapting them. Okay, please defend Dragon Ball Evolution to me. I frickin' dare ya. Generally speaking, engaging with racists is a losing battle. They don't care about facts, their arguments are contradictory and make no sense, and they're not beholden to the usual rules of debate, using and accepting facts, or adjusting arguments when presented with new information. You say racists do this, and frankly, some probably do. I don't know. I don't surround myself with a lot of racists, so yeah, it's entirely possible they do this. However, what you're describing is what gaming journalist outlets like you do. All the time. It's literally what my channel is founded upon, as well as many others on this platform. I mean, it's actually a pretty incredible platform for showing the complete idiocracies that come from your side of the internet. So, yeah, let's just say that, sure, racists do that. Well, guess what? You employ the same tactics as racists. How does that make you feel, the gamer? However, if you wanted a resource to explain why characters may have different skin colors in different adaptations, or some simple examples that disprove certain arguments, then I've got you covered. I'm gonna be honest, I highly doubt they've got us covered. But I'll go in with some semi-good faith, and I say semi-good faith because let's be honest, we all know my bias here. That being said, I'm not a racist, and I am very much open to other points of view. Like I said, go ahead and give me a reason as to defend Dragon Ball Evolution. I will listen to it. So maybe, just maybe, there is a good faith argument in here as to why this is an okay race swap. That being said, I highly, highly doubt it. Despite the latest round of this whole discourse arising from a card that depicts a sword, we'll get to Anduril later, it's the bearer who has borne the brunt of the backlash. Magic the Gathering's Aragorn is black, and people predictably have a problem with that. Like they did with Kaldheim too. No one had an issue with Kaldheim. Guys, I'm a frequent Magic the Gathering player, connoisseur. Granted, I've been boycotting sealed product for the better part of 2.5 years because of wotc's abysmal business practices, but I've still been consistently playing. I mean, by the time you're watching this, yesterday I went to a tournament to try and qualify for regionals. I am quite the fan of the game. The channel Words of Paradise is based off the card Birds of Paradise. My podcast, The Countercast, yes, it's a counterculture show, but also in Magic the Gathering, you cast counters, counter lotr cast. Like, guys, you're not gonna get much bigger fan of the game of Magic the Gathering than your boy here. So I'm gonna tell you, with complete and utter certainty, no one threw a fit about Kaldheim. The most common criticism is that Aragorn is descended from Númenóreans, and they were all white. I don't buy it. Well, of course you wouldn't buy it, because you're not a real nerd, you're not a real gamer, because this entire outlet, and all other outlets like this, are written by individuals who wanted to be writers for politics, but they weren't quite good enough. They just couldn't hack the intensive talent, if we can call it that it takes to be a writer for anything political, so they decided to adopt our culture, and yeah, I'm gonna call it our culture. If the LGBTQ group has their own culture, then nerd culture's a thing. You decided to swoop in here, cosplay as us nerds, be a fake nerd, and then start trying to inject your political bogus into it, and frankly, me and many others aren't a fan of it, because life was just fine, and we were all very happily diverse before you got here. You could roll up to a game of Friday Night Magic, and there'd be plenty of women and folk of color there to play right alongside you, and then get beaten down by some elves. The elves, a lot of which, by the way, were very diverse on the cards, so let's be real. You don't buy it because you don't know what you're talking about. You're coming in here secondhand, already with an agenda. Even if we're ignoring the fact that Númenóreans are made up and Middle-earth is make-believe, there are plenty of people of color in Tolkien works. You're right! There are plenty of people of color in Tolkien works. So why not just adapt them? Why change things? I'll tell you why. This was intentional by Wizards of the Coast, and we all know why Wizards of the Coast did this. They've received so much backlash lately for all manner of things for the last several years, and they very much have shown in the stocks. They've had so many stock drops worth millions as of late. I mean, hey, the D&D movie failed at the box office. I'm sure that has absolutely not stoked the shareholders. But no, Wizards of the Coast is doing this because if they can stoke a controversy about a black Aragorn, something that is incredibly dumb, people will forget about the $1,000 fake cards that were supposed to be the 30th anniversary celebration. Yeah, this was clearly a plot by Wizards of the Coast to distract us with a controversy that is not financial, because if people stop supporting them monetarily, just like any other company, they will go under. It's all manufactured outrage. This was very, very clearly planned to stoke controversy. Controversy, at least some people believe, will lead to sales. Let's be honest, this Lord of the Rings set in general is just not a very good set. When you look at the card designs, the ring tempting you, the other characters they've shown, it's just not a very good set mechanically. It's not going to see a whole lot of like tournament play. It's very much a novelty for Tolkien fans. And I've made a short, frankly a short I'm very proud of because it's gotten over 25,000 views, a little bit of a humble brag there, about how this set is incredibly predatory from a financial aspect, purely taking advantage of both Magic players and Lord of the Rings fans, which of course there is a lot of crossover considering, the similarity of the genres. But yeah, that's the real reason Wizards race swapped Aragorn. Don't let them fool you with this. We're trying to be more inclusive. You can see yourself in these characters, black folks. Magic was already incredibly inclusive. They got lesbians, they got folk of color. Like, there is nothing keeping any sort of minority out of Magic the Gathering. There never really has been. I mean, except maybe this one card. But that one card from the 90s aside that has been banned, and even frankly in my opinion there's debate on whether that should even be banned, the point is they weren't doing this because they just love you black people so much. They're doing this to stoke controversy because that leads to media coverage, because that leads to sales. I mean, I'm adding to it right now, but hey, if I can add to it with a voice that actually matters, then I'm gonna do so. There are entire populations that are described as being majority POC. Correct. Not the Númenóreans, but correct. So why not, once again, adapt them? Where was your populations that were POC, Rings of Power? Mostly in the Harad in the east, places where Númenórean expeditions canonically invaded and colonized. Okay, if the Númenóreans invaded and colonized them, then yeah, odds are we're going to see a whole lot of, not black people in those areas. Let's go back to the Cleopatra controversy. Cleopatra wasn't black. Guess what? The Romans, they were the ones that colonized and conquered Egypt, and that's why we saw white Cleopatra, because her people kept breeding and, led to, maybe not white, olive-toned. Point is, not black. So all the things that were wrong with the Cleopatra show, we can literally apply using your own logic here to Lord of the Rings, and Aragorn would absolutely still be white. Umbar was a city created by Númenórean forces, and you're telling me that people stayed completely separate at all times? They didn't so much as look at one another, let alone form relationships or have children? Okay, well, Aragorn is of royal descent, so there's plenty of room for lore-accurate black or mixed-race Númenóreans if you're willing to actually think about it. But you shouldn't have to think about it. It shouldn't matter. This is a card game that's taking from an existing property that is all about European lore, literally creating European lore. That was Tolkien's idea. Look, are there going to be black folk? Yeah, sure, and that's awesome. That's fine. But when you're going out of your way to change a character written by one of the most prolific writers of all time, and you're doing it well after his death, you're doing it purely to stoke controversy. And the fact that no one can see this, or I'm sure everyone can see this, but plenty of people are ignoring it or trying, shy away from it, direct the conversation in a way that will fit their narrative, how can you not find that disgusting? Or would you like me to rewrite Little Women and make the entire main cast male? I mean, we can go that route. Two can play this game. I, though, think that would be wrong. I think that would be a desecration of that book and that author's intent. But, I respect lore, source material, and, of course, the works of other artists. Another criticism of Magic's Aragorn is that Tolkien described him as white. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate these critics on actually reading the books, which can't be said for those in the above group. To this point, however, I have a few questions. The nature of adaptations is to adapt. It's right there in the name, and there's room for people of color in modern retellings of old stories. Well, this is not a retelling of a story. It's a card game. We're not retelling the story of Lord of the Rings through Magic the Gathering. That's not how Magic the Gathering works. They're not retelling the story through this card game. And even if they were, I'm sorry, I disagree. There is not room for adaptations. When you're talking about adapting things, usually you want to adapt as close to the source material as possible, not stray away from the source material. That's why people get so upset when TV shows or movies come out and they are not like the books they're based on. That is a failed adaptation. Adaptation takes it from one medium to another and should be an attempt to keep it as accurate as possible. Why do you think people get so upset when anime deviates from manga in a way that is, frankly, often worse? Why is it only characters that have been swapped from traditionally or canonically white-skinned descriptions that you care about? And why only now? Well, the reason people only care about this is because it's only happening to white characters. You're not seeing race swaps for non-white characters. In fact, the one instance I can think of was the ancient one from Doctor Strange, who was changed from Asian to a white woman, and people threw a fit about that. They didn't like her being changed both from male to female and from Asian to white. People were not happy about a race swap changing someone to white. It doesn't just go one way. Now, granted, again, that is the only example I can think of, but that's because, well, it's the only one that truly, I'm sure it's not the only one that exists in modern media, but it's the only one I can really think of. Most of the time, they're not changing characters from other ethnicities to white. Not in the modern day. Did that happen in the 60s, 70s, 80s? Sure, we'll say it did, and that's all well and good. But you know what? The 80s was nearly 40 years ago, was 40 years ago at this point. We've moved on. Samwise Gamgee is often described by Tolkien as having brown skin, and yet you're fine with every white adaptation of his character. Many Hispanic fantasy fans saw themselves in Ralph Bakshi's Aragorn from 1978 animation. I don't know why Hispanics would. If anything, Aragorn was very much Native American in Ralph Bakshi's adaptation, but whatever. Who clearly has darker skin tones than his white compatriots. Where was your outcry then? Don't act like you were around back then. There very well may have been, who knows. Also, let's not pretend Lord of the Rings was the cultural juggernaut in 1978 that it is now. There very well may have been outcry. I'm not going to pretend I'm old enough to have been there and, heard about it, seen it, whatnot. And I guarantee you this author wasn't either. So don't talk or write about things that you don't know about in an attempt to portray it as fact. Let's be real, you weren't there, neither was I. That backlash could have been there, or maybe it wasn't. You're also talking about a movie that financially flopped, and again, based off something that was not the cultural juggernaut it is now. So that outrage may or may not have happened, and people may or may not have known about it. It's that simple. It makes it feel like this is just a new front for your culture war. It's not about Tolkien at all, that you didn't care about the fantasy author or his words until it suited your agenda. No one cared about the changing of his work because his work hadn't been changed in any radical way. Now, did the movies change things? Absolutely, and I've met plenty of people that are a bit unhappy with some stuff the movies changed. For example, Sheila showing up in the third film instead of the second because technically that takes place at the end of the second book. Yeah, people were a bit unhappy with that. However, the general consensus is that from adapting from the book to the movie, that was the better course of action. But they didn't change characters, they just changed what would work better for a movie, what would work better in this particular narrative, in this particular media. You're not doing that with a card game. It doesn't actually improve on the character or the narrative just to race swap Aragorn for woke points in a card game. That's not how adaptations work. The calls to respect Tolkien's work begins and ends with skin color. No, it does not. Again, plenty of people actually do talk about how there are issues with the films and that they are not as perfect as everyone claims. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be a Lord of the Rings expert. I like Lord of the Rings. In fact, I like Lord of the Rings a lot, but I'm far from a Tolkien scholar, so I'm going to defer to experts on that matter. And you know what? Most of the Tolkien scholars very upset with this, just as they were Rings of Power. It's not about skin color. It is, in fact, about changing a beloved piece of media that people have grown up with, that they are passionate about. You just don't like the fact that people are fighting back against your culture war. We didn't ask for this. No one asked for a culture war. We were happy just chilling, being nerds, watching Lord of the Rings, watching anime, playing Magic the Gathering, doing whatever we want to do without the culture war. Frankly, if we could all get back to that, man, my news channel, my nerdy news channel, would be a far more positive channel, and I'd be a-okay with that. If all this controversy went away tomorrow and I had to shift my channel to more positive, nerdy news, man, that would be great, because we could get back to doing stuff we love. You stoked the fires of this culture war. Now we're trying to put out the flames as best we can, but you want to keep this fire raging, and then you say that we started the fire. Nah, man, we are the firefighters. I heard no outcry for the canon-breaking Balrog or Simril-infused Mithril in the Rings of Power. There was outcry over all of that. Again, I'm not a Tolkien scholar, and even I absolutely knew the outcry of that. I listened to folks talk about it fervently here on YouTube. Hell, I joined in on some of it well after Rings of Power was finished, because, you know, my channel hadn't taken off yet, or started yet. But the fact of the matter is, people were throwing a fit about those things. You're trying to rewrite history and make it so that people were only upset about skin color in Rings of Power. No, that wasn't the case. When the first, Black Dwarf girl came out, she also didn't have a beard. Both the things you've listed, plus what I added, were all railed against by fans. Only anger against Disa and Orondir, the characters of color in the show. Peter Jackson's film trilogy is now held up as a paragon of Tolkien, when in fact many complained at the time, whether criticism about Ian McKellen turning Gandalf gay, seriously, or the fact there was too much fighting. Yeah, I get that one. You're right. Plenty of people complained about the Peter Jackson trilogy. I said that earlier in the video. There's some common ground. But that's a self-defeating argument, because you literally said earlier, it only matters with skin color. People only talk about respecting Tolkien when it comes to skin color. But now you're saying people were making outcries back then about not respecting Tolkien. So which is it? Are we only trying to respect Tolkien now because of skin color? Or was there an outcry back then for respecting Tolkien? Because guess what? There was, in fact, an outcry back then for respecting Tolkien. You admit it here, which means your above statement is bunk. I love those films, but I'll never forget how they massacred the character Gimli. Yet I never hear a peep about those hefty departures from Tolkien's lore in conversations about Black Aragorn. And you know what? Fair enough. I'll give you that one. I will absolutely give you that one. But people clearly did complain about other things, because you listed them up here. So there were complaints about how it was adapted. Some people may have different complaints than you have, but there were complaints. And what you're trying to claim was that there was none, and it's only appearing now because of skin color, which you go on to even say yourselves isn't the case. At this point, they're not even trying to hide their bias. I mean, this is very clearly an article just to stoke the fans of the fire of the culture war in their favor. And they know that's what they're doing. They know that we're going to react to these. People like me are going to make videos trying to call this out. And yeah, obviously there's going to be a winner in the end. Will it be our side? Will it be their side? I frankly couldn't tell you. I feel like we've been gaining a lot of ground lately thanks to so many good individuals on the internet. Everyone from the high up like Nerdrotic and Friday Night Tights to those who I aspire to be more like and have gotten very close with, like Cult Classic Cage and Hypnotic. I mean, there are so many people fighting these fights for just getting nerd culture to be what it was again, which was free of infighting, unless we're arguing about things like Star Trek versus Star Wars in a fun way, not in this very pedantic, political way. Let's get back to that. Fandom was founded on arguing, but always arguing in fun. You could have a knockdown, drag-out, screaming match about Star Trek versus Star Wars, but then end the night laughing with a few games of Magic the Gathering because we're all still nerds at the end of the day. That's not the nerd culture we have now, and it's your fault, the gamer. The backlash against the people of color in the Rings of Power also disproves another point, which is the oft-parroted adage that actors of color should be limited to roles that are written for them instead of taking those that are reserved for white actors. Aside from the incredible prejudice of this idea, suggesting the POC should stay in their lane and only land roles arbitrarily selected for them, no, that's not what people are saying. Do not twist our words. We're talking about when works are being adapted. When things are being adapted, yeah, characters should stay the same. They should not be changed. Now, if you got a movie that's something completely original and it's not adapting anything, you don't really, it's just a script, you don't have an idea for an actor yet, and let's say Idris Elba auditions for the role and kills it, yeah, give him the part. He had the best audition and the character is a new character. We're not saying only write characters for black people and then only write characters for white people. No one is saying that. We're saying that if there is pre-established canon lore and you're adapting it, keep it the same. And we're saying that not just about white characters, we're saying that about everything. Men, women, different ethnicities, sexualities, whatever. All we want is accuracy. The whole idea of when books were starting to get translated into movies and TV shows is that they were trying to be accurate representations of the source material. You guys have taken that, twisted it, taken a dump on its head, and then thrown it at us fans and said, here, like it, this is what you wanted. No, it wasn't what we wanted. And the fact that POC have been systematically shut out of any roles in Hollywood for decades, again, that can be disproven incredibly easily. We're just going to continue. The actors portraying original characters in a Tolkien adaptation still receive torrents of abuse. If you want to use the whole Middle-earth was a fantasy version of England argument, you're also wrong. While the Shire was based on England, specifically the outskirts of Birmingham, Middle-earth was based on Western Europe as a whole. Vikings traveled as far south as Morocco, and I present to you the same argument I did with Númenórean invaders of Harad. They didn't consume that culture at all. They didn't have peaceful relations with people in the places to which they traveled. Okay, Vikings almost certainly did not. That's kind of what made them Vikings. They were a culture founded on war. So maybe there were some traveling individuals that had peaceful interactions with other ethnicities. Using Vikings is probably an awful choice there. Again, I'm no historian, but Vikings are literally the Saiyans of the real world. No, they probably weren't having peaceful relationships to the places they traveled. Sure, they were often hostile invaders, well there you go, but skeletal DNA tests and archaeological evidence have proved that Vikings not only established trade routes as widespread as Iraq and Newfoundland, but also started families with people of these cultures. Okay, DNA tests, could they have started families? Maybe. Could they have also done what Vikings do, which is rape, pillage, and plunder, and that lead to some mixed DNA? Also possible. Again, I'm not an expert, but neither are you writing this article, so stop trying to pretend like you are. Medieval Europe, including England, was nowhere near as white as you think. The myth of a monoracial Europe and Viking people has been disproven as Nazi misinformation. Oh my god. The criticisms of Anduril itself are less serious. It's an inanimate object, but speak to the knowledge of magic's critics. Complaints have expressed dislike of the Norse runes along the blade. The blade of Narsil that was forged by dwarves who, use a runic language, and the fact that it glows blue, which isn't mentioned in the books. While Anduril isn't entirely elvish, there are an array of elvish blades that do glow blue. Glamdring and Sting most notably. So why wouldn't the elves imbue Anduril with the property when they reforged Narsil? It's got a lore-accurate reasoning behind it, and while Tolkien didn't write this explicitly, it fits within his parameters. You don't get to talk about what fits within his parameters. He would be the one to get to talk about that, but he's dead. If he was alive, if he was here to give the green light, then sure, I would throw my hands up and be like, yep, no, the original author said it was cool. It's cool. But he's not. You don't get to just assume it is within his parameters. Apologies for the crude example, but Tolkien also didn't detail every shit that Frodo took on his way to Mordor, but we can assume he left a trail of fibrous droppings along his path. When it comes to interpretations and adaptations, why would you want things to be boring? No one wants it to be boring. What makes you think accurate is boring? When someone reads something, they picture it in their head, and then they think, wouldn't it be cool if this was real? And movies and TV shows and whatnot give us a chance to see what it would be like if it was real, but we want it to be as real and accurate to what we were reading. What about accuracy is boring? Answer me that. We've seen countless white Aragorns and even more plain silver swords, so why would you want the same again? Countless white Aragorns? We've seen one. The Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson adaptation. The only other adaptation for movies, I should specify, for movies, was the animated ones prior, and like you said earlier, Aragorn wasn't even white in that one. So how have we seen countless white Aragorns? That doesn't make sense. I mean, okay, yeah. Oh, Lord of the Rings stage plays. Maybe a white guy played Aragorn. Yeah, all 12 people that went because their kids were in the play, sure, they saw, a white Aragorn. Whoop-de-fucking-do. Even if you don't like an adaptation or an artistic choice, it doesn't ruin the books. They're still there. Magic the Gathering hasn't stolen and burned every copy of the Fellowship of the Ring that you own. It's put its own spin on a fantasy world. But people have that issue. You don't get to dictate what people get to have problems with. If people have a problem with something they are passionate about being changed, they have that right, and they have the right to voice that. This is all make-believe, so dream bigger. And yes, it is all make-believe in the sense that none of it is real, but the effect it had on individuals and will continue to have on individuals is real. And when people want to see something in real life that is an adaptation of the make-believe version of what was in their heads, what is wrong with wanting it to be accurate? You didn't do anything in this article that has any semblance to what your title was about. I mean, again, your title was literally called Magic the Gathering's Aragorn Backlash is just another racist trap. How's it a trap? You didn't explain how it was a trap. No. It is a racist trap, but it's a racist trap from Wizards of the Coast. They are the ones who are being racist in that they want you, people of color, minorities, black people, whatever, to be like, hey, we care about you, when they don't. They're the ones being racist by taking characters that were not of that certain skin color, changing it, and then saying, oh, it's for you. Take the white people's sloppy seconds because you're not good enough to have your own characters. That is what's racist. So yes, it is a racist trap, but not in the way this article tries to describe. Those are my opinions, at least. Let me know yours in the comments below, or let me know on Twitter, where you can find me at BoltTheWord. And please do subscribe. We are less than 50 people away from the 1,000 subscriber mark, so I hope I can get that subscription from you today. It would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. I am a nerdy news channel. I do nerdy news every day, not always about Lord of the Rings or Magic the Gathering, but about anything in the nerdosphere. Movies, anime, Dungeons and Dragons, you name it, it's all here in the nerdosphere, and this has been Words of Paradise.